All right. Well, hey, everyone. Welcome to another episode of the Heromakers Podcast. It's good to be with you guys again. I have to say, you guys, I'm like having the best time talking to our guests and spending time with Ann. And if you guys see her, she's like dancing now. But it's really fun to meet some of these amazing people in person. And I should say, hey, Ann, how you doing? I'm just talking away.
Hi, Laurie.
Hi. How's it going up there in Toronto?
It's great. The weather is amazing and the leaves are turning. Yeah. It's brilliant.
Okay, so one of my friends over in New Hampshire, she was sending me pictures of some trees and they're like bright red. And here they're not quite turning. They're turning a little bit, but like not to that extent. So maybe because she's a little bit further north. So are you seeing a lot of changing of the leaves up there?
There's always the first tree on our block that is just brilliant red. And it's so pretty. Yeah, so I love this. I love this season.
It's so good. Yeah. And last week I promised, I said this on the podcast, that last week I promised to take Silas, our son, apple picking. And once again, I dropped the ball. So this weekend it's going to happen. We're going to let him pick his first apple by himself. Parenting is just hard. I don't know. Anyways, so you guys, we have a great guest on the show today, and her name is Sheridan Richards. And if you guys don't know her, then one, you need to know her, and two, you will hear her name because she is what I call, we were joking earlier today, I call her trailblazer because she's just like doing great wonders down there in Little Rock, Arkansas. And so, hi, Sheridan, how are you?
Hi, I'm doing well. Thank you so much for having me today.
You're welcome. So why don't you start off, Sheridan, by telling us a little bit about yourself, where you're from, and then how you ended up in Little Rock.
Yeah, okay. So I am originally from Southern California. I was born in the Los Angeles area, raised in Edwards Air Force Base, grew up in a military family, and was pretty much raised in the Air Force throughout my childhood. Always the new person on the block, learning how to actively listen and add value to new settings. We relocated every 2 to 4 years of my childhood. And looking back, that's done a huge job of shaping who I am today. Fast forwarding to the present with how we got here to Little Rock, my husband accepted a job as a pastor here in the community. And at that time, we'd been living in Chicago for almost 7 years. And so my response to him was, if I find something, we'll go. If not, we'll reevaluate. And a few weeks later, I found something. And so we knew that this is where we were supposed to be. And so we're here now. I work in human resources as a senior manager, have been in this space for about 20 years now. I've worked in the corporate, nonprofit and government sectors, and have had some really amazing experiences. And so I'm glad to bring all of that here to our community and to identify new ways that I can add value.
That's so great. So, so Sheridan, we knew each other way back when, I don't know, 5 years ago, right? Something like that.
Not that ago.
Right? and I knew you in the HR capacity. Now, today we're going to be talking a little bit about you running for public office. And so tell us a little bit about what your latest venture is down there.
Yeah, so I am running for City Board of Directors, and the way our City Council is set up, there are 7 representative seats that cover a certain portion of the city, and there are 3 at-large seats that cover the city as a whole. I'm running for one of the at-large seats. It's position number 10. So for those of you who live in Little Rock, anyone who lives within Little Rock, regardless of where you live in our city, you can vote for me for position 10. And so what led me to jump into that race is my husband and I were going for a walk back in April, and we're all in the middle of a pandemic. And so we were finding creative ways to exercise without exposing ourselves to germy people. And so we were out taking a walk, and what I thought was random, said, would you ever consider running for a local office? And I made a bunch of excuses about having young kids and, not really having name recognition. But my response was, if the time ever presents itself, I certainly will. This has been a dream of mine since college. I was a political science major. And though we studied federal and state laws, I've always been drawn to local government, as I knew at some point in my life this was something I'd pursue. So that was April when we had that conversation. fast forward to June, I kick off a Bible study with a group of women via Zoom. I think we all were from like 4 different states, and we walked through the book of James together, and I was leading it. And when I got to chapter 2, the part that talks about your faith without works being dead, I was challenging the women to live out their faith in the midst of a season when we're forced to shelter in place. And so we're having that conversation, and I hear the Holy Spirit asking me, like, how are you living out what you believe? And I felt this strong conviction because around that time, the board seats had opened up for election, and a friend called me, also a believer, asking if I would consider throwing my hat in the ring. And I thought, why not? I could not make excuses for not doing so. And in fact, I felt like if I didn't do it, I was going to regret it because I knew the gaps here. I had already assessed the ways I could add value. Though I initially thought it would be in a volunteer capacity. I didn't necessarily jump right to public office right away. That's when the light bulb moment turned on for me. And I thought, okay, we're doing this.
Wow, I'm impressed. Way to go. And I bet your husband's like, haha, I knew it all along.
And Laurie, you know my husband, so you can laugh at this. I honestly, and I thought maybe he'll talk me out of this. So when I told him I was going to do it, I thought he was going to like list all the reasons I shouldn't. And he looked at me and said, okay. And I thought, really? Just okay, we're doing this? Like, it's not just me, it's our whole family. You do realize this, right? And he was
that's true.
All in.
Oh, that's awesome that you have such a supportive spouse then, that he's going to say it was his idea.
Only if you win, right? Otherwise, if you don't win, he'll be like, no, it was your idea.
Right. See how this
Still his idea. So as a Canadian, I was just Google mapping where in the world Little Rock is. Sorry, my geography is like not awesome. But can you tell us about the context of where you live, and so we can understand the weight of you running?
Yeah. So we are about 5 hours north of Dallas. We are 2 hours 2 hours west of Memphis, and we're just a small town. It's a very small town feel. Everyone knows each other here, or there's very few degrees of separation. In addition to that, there's still a lot of racial division in our city. Most people, when they hear of Little Rock here in the US, they tend to read about it in their history books because we have a historical high school here that was part of the first integration efforts back during the Civil Rights Movement when Black and white students first started going to school together. And that was a very contentious time in our city, to the point that the governor at the time shut down the schools because he was against it. The president had to intervene and enforce the integration policy. And so our city has had that tension. And today in 2020, though this happened, I think we're 60 years out now. Now in 2020, people are still feeling the pain of that. And the people who graduated from Central High back then, they're still around and they still have these old school views, and it's contributed to this hatred that you can feel here. And so one of the things that I want to help do through this board seat is help unify our city across racial lines. My upbringing as a military kid, I've always lived in diverse settings. I've always had friends of multiple ethnic backgrounds, cultures. That's all I know. And so to live in a city where people are so divided based on what you look like and tend to gravitate towards people who look like them, that's not something that I'm accustomed to. And it's not what we've raised our kids to be either. And so I want to help bridge that and bring people together. Other things I would say is when you drive through our city, and this hit us when we first came here to interview as candidates, because I had to interview with my husband as he was being considered for his pastoral role. Right as soon as we got here, we could notice the poverty. We could see the housing disparities. You could see the food deserts. We have 17 food deserts in our city, which is insane. That means people are taking 2 buses across town to get their milk, their eggs, their bread, and then 2 buses to go back home. It's astonishing how much room there is to grow here. And I have to attribute it to a lack of leadership that has leaders who have failed to represent everyone equitably. There are parts of our city that are booming, and they look almost like they're a separate city from the part that has been neglected. And so I want to help bring equity into the conversation and help fix the areas that have been overlooked.
Yeah, Sheridan, there's so much there. I am interested in, you're talking about the racial divide there. And I don't think I knew that there was still kind of that, would you say there's animosity or is it ignorance? What would you say that it is, upbringing?
It's a mixture. It depends on who you talk to, because there are older generations who will say that we shouldn't have to apologize for what happened in our past. There are people of various ages who would say, like I say, that we have a lot of repenting to do as a city, and that until we address the hurt and the wounds that are there, we can't move past it. There are some who have been so hurt by things that have happened in the past, they're kind of just stuck and don't see a way out. It's a broad mixture, but then you have this younger generation coming up, and I'm speaking of those probably between the ages of 18 to maybe 45 or 50, who are ready for a change. And there's this momentum that's building, and we're starting to see the conversation shift and people get more engaged with what's happening at the local level, and recognizing that the people who are running this city need to represent the values that they align with.
Okay, so you decide to run for city council, knowing that like this is the context that you're going into. You are a very strong, I would call your personality a very strong leadership, right? You have a very strong vision, passion. It's marvelous. It's amazing. And so here you are. You're this younger Black woman who is coming in. I think you had mentioned when we were talking offline about that you are the first female Black woman who is running for an at-large position, right? It's like a non-elected position in Little Rock. So
wow.
when you decide to run, was there any part of you that was like a little bit uncertain, like what am I getting myself into? Kind of that part. And then the other side of it is what really excited you about this idea of possibly being a trailblazer and a change maker for your city?
Yeah. I believe there have been other Black women who have run. I just don't think, at least I could not find through a Google search, that any Black women have actually been elected into an at-large seat. So I just want to clarify that in case there are those who have run and I'm just not aware. But I would say I didn't give, and maybe I'm naive, you guys, because I didn't really, like, we weighed the pros and cons more so as a family in terms of how much time is this going to take? What's the sacrifice? Like, I looked at it that way, and I think I focused more internally to my family as opposed to externally when I was weighing, should I do this? Should I not? And after I got in the race is when I started thinking, uh-oh, this is a little bit crazy. What am I doing? But the conviction, I felt it, and I still feel it so strongly in my gut. I feel like there is so much at stake that I just can't walk away from it. And I really believe had I not thrown my hat in the ring, I would have regretted it. And it would have been something I would have had to really reconcile with myself, with my heart, because I know this is something that God has called me to do. In terms of what makes me excited, I'm excited about the vision that I bring. My vision is a fresh start. And I will admit part of it is a contrast to the person who has been in this seat for 28 years. I think she has a stale perspective that she brings to her role. But in addition, it's a fresh start because I'm an insider and an outsider. As an insider, I'm a mom, I'm a wife, I'm an employee of this city, I'm a resident. And so I know what it's like to live here. But then as an outsider perspective, I've been other places, whether I've lived or traveled. I've studied other places through my educational experiences. And so I feel like that's something that makes me excited to be able to bring that to the conversation. I also get excited when I think of my children, because I think the children of this city are the future of our city. And so my fifth grader and my kindergartner, knowing that the work I'm doing now is going to make this city better for them, is something that also makes me excited. And I will admit, when the Trailblazer conversation started cropping up about 2 weeks ago, I thought, wow, like that had actually never occurred to me, because you would think in 2020 by now we should not be just now talking about having a first. It's a shame if I truly am the first, but if I am, it's an honor, and I want to wear it well. And I do have this burden of not wanting to let people down. There's so much at stake, and I just want to serve well. I want to make sure I'm faithful to what I believe as a Christian, that I'm loving my neighbor well, and being faithful to my witness.
I love it. Yeah, I'm so glad that you're stepping in. I really, obviously, your 20 years of work in human resources, it just has like served you because that's such a complex job already. And it means that you understand people and systems. And that's perfect. It really is a perfect background to come from. But also, you've like lived in such different contexts and you've seen how other people have lived differently. And so you're coming in with that experience too. So I feel like you just have all these amazing, values and experiences that you bring. And so I'm really, really excited for you and as well for the children. So thanks. And then I was thinking about the hero traits that we're focusing on. And there's a few I think that apply to you, but the one as you were just speaking reminded me of the trait of grit.
Mm.
Let's read about the definition. The quick definition is keeping going despite the challenges. So what is it like, as you go and you're now like, I don't, now you're running, like, what does it look like on the daily for you?
Yeah, so I'm a full-time employee. I work for the state of Arkansas. So I'm literally using all of my free time to do this.
Mm-hmm.
There are bigger races at the federal level, state level, where candidates raise money to cover their personal expenses so they can quit their jobs or reduce their work schedules. We don't have that luxury because it's difficult raising money at the local level because people often don't pay attention to it. So I'm working full time for the state of Arkansas. I utilize my evenings, my weekends. Last weekend, my kids campaigned with me all day because daddy had somewhere he had to be, also campaign related. And so we were out there with our t-shirts on. They've got little kid t-shirts that they wear. And we were out in the community campaigning together. So literally all of our free time. Today I took a vacation day so I could get some campaign done. I'll be out in the community after our call today, speaking at a barber shop, visiting a Taekwondo center.
Wow.
Earlier this morning I was with volunteers. And so it's a pretty busy schedule. But it's what we signed up for, and we're counting down the days till November 3rd. I think we're just over 30 days right now away, give or take, and we're just maintaining a marathon mindset. That's been our mantra, a marathon mindset.
So Sheridan, one of my friends, she grew up in a political family, and so she kind of had this inside scoop. And so I remember her telling me this stories of just some of the people that she knew who had, kind of gained more notoriety as they've moved up in their service to our country. And I remember her remarking to me about how, like, most of the people who run for office start with really good intentions, that they want to do good. They really love the country. They love the city. They love their area. And so it really is kind of like this, like more of a sacrificial, service type attitude. And then somewhere along the way, other things kind of creep in. And then before we know it, we have candidates who just have really bad reputations. So give us just what are your thoughts on that? I know that you're new to public service here, but what are your thoughts on how does that happen? I mean, I think it's valuable to us because we are, for those of us who are involved, we're just looking in and why? What is this kind of person who got elected? But people don't often start off like that. It happens. So what is your thoughts on that?
Yeah, so the first thought that comes to mind is compromise. And for me, I'll be honest, that's what took me so long to even step into politics, is because I didn't want to have to deal with compromise. But when you think of it, politics is give and take. It's making sure you can bring everyone to the table, though you don't agree, though you may not like each other, but figuring out a way to work towards a common goal. And so I would say compromise is where people can often lose themselves. As a Christian woman, what's helped me during this campaign, and I feel like I've had a chance to experience this a bit, just given what has come up in some of my conversations with constituents who all want something. Everybody has a an idea of what an at-large director should bring to the role. Everyone has their own priorities that they want the person in this seat to focus on. Depending on, where you sit, your priorities are going to be different. And so in my conversations with them, I can feel the tug, like, okay, so if I'm going to get your vote, I have to make sure I prioritize this thing, though this thing I don't think is a thing I should be prioritizing, especially in the midst of a pandemic. So I'm already experiencing that. What has helped is making sure that I am true to who I am as a Christian woman. And so I've been very careful to prioritize my time in scripture, very careful to maintain my devotion time, my quiet time. And there are two women that I walk through scripture with. One lives in Iowa, the other lives in Indiana. And literally, I'm going through separate Bible studies with them. And it's helping, though I'm helping them as they're significantly younger than me, for me, it's helping me make sure that I'm staying true to who I am. And then this summer, I led a Bible study of women through James, and we walked through it through 6 sessions, the entire book of James. And as I'm challenging them as their Bible study leader, I'm challenging myself to be true. I think another way people get lost is they start creating idols out of the issue that they care about so much, whatever political issue that could be. They also create idols out of their political parties. And I think as Christians, we have to be very careful to make sure that first and foremost, we are aware that we are here to serve God. We're created for God alone. We serve an audience of one, and all that other stuff is secondary or tertiary, whatever you want to call it. But we need to be true to scripture and true to our relationship with God. And then ask for his wisdom and how we are to live that out, whether it's by voting or by serving. And so there's not a day that I go into the field when it's a campaign day or my vacation day or my weekends. There's not a day I go into the field or into these conversations and don't ask the Holy Spirit to give me a fresh portion, because I need his wisdom to navigate these situations. Most people I speak to are probably not going to be believers. And if they are, they may not be truly walking with the Lord. So I'm cautious that I ask the Holy Spirit to keep me grounded, because I know there's a war between our flesh and our spirit, and I want to make sure that the spirit wins through this.
You're reminding me of this passage in the New Testament when Jesus sends off his disciples 2 by 2, and how he said, first go to our people. And if they welcome you, awesome. If they don't, then brush off the dust off your sandals and keep going. And I feel like Jesus is saying at that moment to redefine who your people are. And that is radical. Like, I think the people we think that are our people aren't necessarily going to be our people when it comes down to it. And then, but like, surprisingly, you might have these other people who your values align. You don't necessarily agree 100%, but they are with you. And so you're like, oh, wow. And I really hope that you find that. Yeah, but also I think it means dreaming, having the imagination for what it could look like.
Yes.
So what are your dreams then? Like, what do you hope? Maybe how many years is it? Is it a 4-year term?
It is a 4-year term, yes.
Okay.
So my vision for our city is actually a fresh start. And FRESH is an acronym that stands for family, reading, equity, skill development, and housing. And with the family, I'm thinking through the inequity in our city across racial and socioeconomic lines. And so for the family piece, I want to make sure our neighborhoods are maintained equitably, that your zip code doesn't determine whether or not the potholes are fixed in your neighborhood or whether the street lights are fixed. So that's the family piece. I also want to make sure our city is more inclusive. We have a very diverse population, religiously, with regard to different types of families, blended, single parent. We have a pretty substantial LGBT community. And so making sure that our city is inclusive and that we all are challenged to love our neighbors well, though we may not agree with their lifestyle or with what they believe, we still have a duty to love each other well. So that's the family piece. And then the reading piece is because 60% of our third graders are not reading at grade level, and that's a problem. Mm-hmm. The third grade is a pretty well-researched age for telling us whether or not a child is going to end up in jail or in poverty, or just making a series of bad choices throughout their lives. And so getting a child to read at grade level by third grade is very, very critical. And so I'm a part of a nonprofit here in Central Arkansas that provides reading resources for children to help them get there. And so I felt it was important to build that into the campaign, because we have an education crisis in this pandemic with a lot of children learning virtually. There's concern we may not get the educational outcomes that we would get if they were in the classroom. So I felt it was important to build that in. We have a school district that has been under state control for the past 5 years. It's being returned to local control this coming January. And next month, we will elect a new school board. And so I think we have a unique opportunity to form a partnership between our city directors, which is what I'm running for, and our school board to make sure that we have the wraparound resources that our kids are going to need to get through this pandemic and to also get them on the right trajectory. My kids are in public schools, so I have a vested interest in this. And so when I think of reading, it's not just reading, it's a real educational arm to the campaign. The E stands for equity. And in case you didn't notice, FRESH has 5 letters, F-R-E-S-H, and equity is right at the center of that acronym. And to me, that's huge, because everything we do with government, whether it's voting, proposing resolutions or ordinances, should start with equity. And if it doesn't, then someone's going to be marginalized or left with a short end of the stick. And so with equity, I'm thinking of eliminating those food deserts in our city. I'm thinking of making sure people have equitable access to transportation, that our sidewalks are better maintained so that people who are physically disabled can navigate them safely. There are sidewalks less than 2 blocks from our governor's mansion that you can't even navigate in a wheelchair because they are horribly maintained.
Wow.
And so making sure that our city is accessible for everyone, regardless of your able-bodiedness, is also a part of this. That's the equity piece. The S is skill development, and that focuses on reskilling and upskilling our workforce. Our city is poised for growth. We have companies that are moving here. Costco is coming. Amazon is coming. So we have jobs that are coming, and we're poised for crazy growth over the next 2 to 5 years. My concern as an HR professional is that if we are not proactive, our residents will not be ready to step into those jobs. And so I'm thinking through how we can train our residents so that we're not recruiting outside the city of Little Rock. The talent is here, but it needs an opportunity. And so it's a workforce development arm of the campaign, and I'm looking for partnership opportunities to get those job training programs in place. And then H is housing, and that focuses on creating affordable pathways to housing. About half of our city is comprised of renters, and Arkansas doesn't have any law that provides minimum standards for a rental. And so it's hard to find a house to rent that is safe and quality and affordable, which is astonishing. There's a lot of work to do at the state level there. But for the local level, what I want to do is balance the conversation, because when you talk to people here about housing, some of them care just about the landlords, making sure they're taken care of. Other people care just about the renters and making sure they're taken care of, but there's really no medium. There's no median solution there. And so I want to make sure we're balancing the conversation while we're in a pandemic, trying to avoid a housing crisis. It's easier to keep a family housed than it is to get them off the streets. And so I want to make sure that we're thinking of equitable solutions so that neither the renters nor the landlords are left holding the bag. And so those are the things that I bring to the table as a candidate. That's my vision for our city. All of those are important to me, but if you were to ask me which one is the most urgent, the housing piece would be for me because of the pandemic situation that we're in.
So Sheridan, like you have done a lot of homework on your city, and like you sound like a great candidate. Like I would vote for you if I lived there. If I lived in Little Rock.
Thank you.
So, okay, so here you are, and you're kind of like out front, and you're like fresh start, Little Rock, and so but what you're talking about, like a number of these are like systemic issues. They're like big issues. It's not like, oh, you know, a few people are struggling with poverty. I mean, you said there's 17 of these food deserts in your city, and like housing, like education. These are all like big systemic things. And so in our audience, like for the individual who's listening, like I wonder what does it look like to be a hero maker in with big systemic issues as well. So, I mean, your path is running for office and hopefully creating this, trickle down. And probably, I'm assuming part of that is bringing people in these communities together and hearing their voices. And but for those who are just listening, who aren't running for public office, and what could we do to address some of these big issues that aren't just in Little Rock? I mean, this housing, education, reading, these kind of things are happening all over the place. So what would you say to the everyday person?
Yeah, so I would start off by saying there's a role for everyone to play in this, whether it is serving with your local nonprofits. A lot of the gaps that you may be experiencing in your city are trying to be filled by nonprofits that are serving and just looking to help the people that are in need. And so I would start off with looking for a nonprofit to volunteer with. Please give and support them because they're trying to raise money to provide those services. That's a good place to start. Here with the city of Little Rock, we have a number of commissions that invite local residents to join as volunteers, and they help speak to some of these smaller issues. Like they narrow the conversation to focus on just one issue. So you can focus on economic development, you can focus on housing, you can focus on youth programming. Whatever your passion area is, you've got to start off with volunteering. And then if local office is for you, then throw your hat in the ring. One of the things that's been astonishing this year here in Arkansas is people are complaining about a lot of the candidates who've held seats for so long, but some of these candidates are running unopposed. And so they're going to keep winning those seats because nobody is stepping out to run against them. And even the person I'm running against, she's been in her seat for 28 years. And she has run unopposed at times. And I think the last time she ran, her opponent dropped out of the race about a month before the election due to some personal matters. And so we've got to have people developed to step into these pipelines so that we can make sure that we're able to compete for these roles and hold people accountable with our votes. Get out and vote. Voting is critical. I've met so many people during this campaign season who've told me, I don't vote, so I don't know why you're talking to me. And I'm thinking, are you serious? Like the local elections, we are the ones who decide where the money goes. But people are getting distracted by the presidential race as if that's all that matters. Whereas though we get money from the federal government, it's the local people that decide where that money goes. And so get involved in that way as well. Exercise your vote, call the people in office and hold them accountable to do their jobs.
Yeah. I think, there's kind of an inertia too, because in this political season, I think it's just some people just don't want to think about it because of what's going on at the national level, right? It's kind of like, it's just clouding things. So I have one more question, and I'm sure Ann's gonna have another one because I'm hogging the conversation. But so you are, okay, so you're a mom of two and you work full time and now you're running for office. And I'd like for you to inspire the listener right now who has kind of a big dream but feels like they're afraid to step into it because of time commitments. Can I do it? Kind of the uncertainty of it. Like, what would you say to the person who really is feeling compelled to do something, but is unsure?
Yeah, I would say start somewhere. Even if it's just reading and having conversations with your neighbors, start somewhere. It doesn't have to be a big thing that happens out front where everybody sees you. Just figure out what works for you. One thing that has been huge for my husband and I, we've been married for 11 years now, is every season of our marriage, whether it's having a new baby or having a second baby or maybe becoming a stay-at-home mom or transitioning back to work and becoming a full-time mom, full-time employee again. All the transitions we've had throughout our marriage together, we have always been intentional about pausing and recalibrating and talking through, okay, here's how we need to shift things around a little bit so we can make this work, realizing that his goals are just as important as mine and vice versa, so that no one feels like they're less important than the other. So recalibration, I would say, don't be afraid to shift your life around. We even do that as our kids' developmental needs change. I have a kindergartner and a fifth grader. My fifth grader is super independent, but my kindergartner needs more support because that's just the age she is developmentally. And so I know as she becomes more independent, we'll be able to recalibrate again, and then maybe we'll have more bandwidth to do more. Who knows? But I would just say, Approach your life seasonally, realizing that as your family needs change, you will need to change and you'll need to recalibrate, and it's not static. We just shift as our family demands require us to. Does that answer your question?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah.
Anything else, Anne?
Well, I was going to ask about, well, I just think like people don't vote as well because they feel overwhelmed and they think, I'm just one person, you know, how am I going to change the world? But like, I totally agree with you. Just do something or have a conversation with somebody or just get out and talk to your neighbors and get to know them. And then, yeah, I feel like the path will just be really obvious once you actually start having conversations and getting to know people. I think the one question I had for you is like, I think you will have challenges. I think that's par for the course. And then what are you going to do? Like, what do you have a strategy of like, this is going to be really hard? And I mean, how maybe like your track record, how have you handled opposition or difficulty in the past? And how will that serve you well into this role?
You know, it's interesting. I was reflecting on that this morning because I've been in situations that kind of, for lack of a better word, just shocked me at how challenging they were. For example, when I served in ministry years ago, church ministry, I was on the track to ordination. I experienced so much sexism, mostly from women, not from men, even though I was in a denomination that allowed women to be ordained. And so that was something that just kind of slapped me in the face. And that experience showed me that that denomination was smaller than what I felt my calling was supposed to be. Not to discount the denomination, but I think my calling just wasn't really for that place. And so I used that to direct me somewhere else. And then when I served as an executive director of a nonprofit of a camp and conference center, I went to a conference that was for people who worked in camps and conferences. Mm-hmm. And part of the conference, they had workshops for people depending on your roles. If you were a program director, you went to this workshop. If you were a cafeteria worker, you went to that workshop. If you were executive director, you went to, particular workshops. So I went to the executive director workshop. And when I walked in the room, it was full of white men all over the age of 55. And the first thing they said to me wasn't hello. It was, oh, the program directors are meeting down the hall. And I said, actually, I'm an executive director. Here's my business card. My name is Sheridan Richards. Nice to meet you. And I was 30 years old at the time and thought, really? This is still happening? And so that was a slap in the face. And then when I talked with women after that, like who worked in other types of industries, I learned that wasn't an anomaly, that does happen a lot of different places. So what I've done is I've chosen to rise above it. I've chosen to prove people wrong. If they have a stereotype of what women can't do, or what Black women can't do, or what someone under 40 can't do, then I'm going to prove them wrong. And I hope I blow it out of the water by the power of the Holy Spirit and just totally blow their mind with thinking through what's possible. And so that's what I've chosen to do. I've chosen not to take it personal because I know it's bigger than me, and to just lean into the fact that I can give it my best. And if I fall flat on my face, fine, at least I can say I tried. There was one time when I was at a church service and they were going to license me to preach the gospel. And I got to the meeting late because I had a ministry engagement. And when I walked in the room, they called me down to the front and I had no idea what the protocol was. I didn't know there were certain areas I wasn't supposed to walk. I just went to the microphone, grabbed it, answered their questions. And afterwards I learned, oh shoot, I probably should have stood to the side or stood in it totally just messed up the whole protocol. I had no idea. And that's my ignorance, but it's authentically me. I'm going to do the best I can. I'm going to lead with empathy. I am going to love my neighbor well, and I pray it's received. If not, as you said, Ann, I'm going to shake the dust off my feet and keep it moving. So that's my attitude. I feel like my kids need to see me do that so that they will know it's okay to make a mistake. Just give it your best and keep it moving. Give God the glory, honor him first, do your best, love your neighbor well, and keep it moving. That's my motto.
I love that,
Amen.
Sheridan. Yeah, you know what? I think you're gonna win. I'm gonna call the race early. Is it like too early to call the race? I don't know, but I'm gonna call it early. Maybe one of those people. Sheridan, where can we find you on social media?
Yeah, thank you for asking. So I want to start off with my website. It's votesheridanrichards.com. All my social media info is on there. I am on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. On Facebook, my page is Vote Sheridan Richards. My Instagram is @Vote Sheridan Richards. And my Twitter handle is @_S Richards 2020. And so I'm on all three of those platforms. You can also subscribe to our email updates through our website as well.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And I would just like to say, like now doing this whole Hero Makers movement, that like just the social media part is a full-time job. Like you're like adding that's one other thing, right, that you have to at least think about. Sheridan, it was great to have you. I feel like, you know, being a trailblazer is so great. And, you know, I've said this before and I'll say it again, that I mean, my hope is that a generation from now, like our kids' generation, will be the one that actually see that all of the fights that we're fighting today, they don't have to fight them because we are. And that's my hope too for you. Like, you know, that you would allow people to see something different that doesn't exist right now, right? Dreaming big. So thank you for being on the podcast, Sheridan.
Thank you so much for having me. This is a pleasure talking with you guys, and Anne, such a pleasure meeting you.
You too.
Thank you so much.
Yeah. And thanks for joining us, you guys. And as you guys may have noticed, we're dropping 2 episodes the first few weeks here to get you guys really engaged with the podcast. So help us spread the word. We're growing, but we need you to help us and give us a 5-star rating. That helps us too. If you don't, it's okay. We'll still love you anyway. And we'll see you guys next time. Bye-bye.